The truth is, I didn't go into this field because I love lab work or textbook science. I went into it because I lost someone I loved. My uncle Mida had died from a heart attack, part of the domino effect from his diabetes. So did my grandfather, and so did my other uncle. And when I got pregnant the year after that, I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes, and I thought I had it under control. But after I gave birth, the numbers didn't go back to normal. I was now a diabetic, with a newborn, and a head full of medical knowledge that suddenly wasn't working in real life. So this episode is all about what I wish I knew sooner about diabetes and diet. So the first thing is, clean eating doesn't fix diabetes. I used to think that if I ate clean, I was safe. But chicken, quinoa, and a side of fruit, that still would spike my sugar. So if you're not eating things in the right order, and when you're insulin resistant, spikes hit harder and crash even faster. So you don't need perfect food, but you need food that fits your metabolism. So what that would mean is, instead of having quinoa and fruit in the same meal, have one serving of carbs and maybe load more up on protein and green vegetables. And moreover, eat the protein, vegetables, and healthy fats before the carbs, like the quinoa or the piece of fruit. If you do this, you'll lower that blood sugar spike by 30 to 70%. And in addition, you'll be having macros that fit your genetics. The next thing is that carbs aren't the enemy. Timing is. I wish someone had told me this earlier. Diabetics don't run on gas. We run on diesel. That means protein first, fiber first, then carbs. And if your body can handle them. Now, I'm not saying never eat rice again. I'm saying don't lead with it. So what that means is if someone's earlier in their diabetic journey and the sugar is very high, yes, I may advocate for a very low carb diet in the beginning. However, over time, we will gain carb tolerance back. And when we do eat carbs, we should be sequencing it, meaning eating it last on the plate after protein, healthy fats, and fiber. That way, it delays that sugar spike and will stop that sugar crash. The third thing no one told me is that blood sugar has nothing to do with willpower. I've had patients crying in my office saying, I know what to do, I just don't do it. But here's the truth. You don't crave because you're weak. You crave because your sugar's on a roller coaster. If you fix the blood sugar, you'll fix your hunger and cravings. And suddenly, you're not addicted to food anymore. And that's what I wish someone had told me. I used to eat dinner and then 3 hours later, wind up at the fridge going for a snack. And it wasn't because of anything I did wrong with my willpower. It was because the meal I had before made my blood sugar spike and drop and send me right to the fridge. Let's talk about cravings, because this was one that wrecked me for years. I used to think that if I was craving chocolate at 3 p.m., it meant I had lack of willpower, or that I needed more discipline. But here's what I didn't know. Cravings weren't emotional, it was biological. See, cravings can also come from blood sugar crashes, not personality flaws. And so when you eat in a way that spikes your sugar, especially in the morning, your body does two things. First, it overcompensates by releasing a ton of insulin. And then a couple hours later, your sugar will drop and your brain starts to panic. It says, give me something fast. And guess what's fast? Carbs. Let me give you a good example I see all the time. You have a big bowl of pasta for dinner. You're full. You sit on the couch and you feel fine until 9 or 10 p.m. And suddenly you're in the pantry looking for cookies, chips, something crunchy, something sweet, something salty. You're not hungry, you're restless and you're snacky. And you'll tell yourself, I just want a little treat. But here's what really happened. That carb-heavy meal gave you a sugar surge, and then your insulin spiked to pull it down, and then you crashed. So by 9 p.m., your blood sugar's dipping and your dopamine's dropped. And your brain is now searching for a fast way to get it back up. So you snack, not because you're weak, but because your body's still on a glucose roller coaster. This rewire takes time, but it works. This is why it takes at least 6 weeks to reset this pattern. You have to prove to your brain over and over, we're not doing the spike crash thing anymore. And it's hard at first, but then something wild happens. One night, you realize you're not thinking about snacks. You're not white-knuckling through cravings. You're just okay. And that's not willpower, that's chemistry, stabilized. Even if you had a healthy lunch, you still want that cookie at 3 p.m.? That's not self-control, it's a dopamine loop. And what most people don't realize is that food, especially hyperpalatable, high-carb food, stimulates dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. It's the same pathway activated by addictive drugs, alcohol, or even TikTok scrolling. And the more you use it, the more your brain builds that reward loop. There's even research showing that consistent sugar exposure literally changes dopamine receptor response in your brain, meaning it takes more sugar to get the same hit over time. I call this the Pavlov's dogs and bead jar effect. I started noticing this with myself and with my clients. Cravings didn't stop in a day. They stopped when you consistently ate in a way that kept your blood sugar stable and gave your dopamine system time to reset. Think of Pavlov's dog. They rang the bell, the dog salivates. For us, sugar, dopamine, craving, repeat. Well, what we do instead is ring the bell and don't feed the sugar. But that's not instant, it takes reps. And that's why I use what I call the bead jar. Every time you skip the spike, you still survive the craving, you earn a bead. It takes about 6 weeks for this, for your brain to truly rewire. And when it happens, you realize you're not fighting cravings anymore. You're just not having them. Another thing I wish people had told me is that calories matter, but not in the way you think. I used to count every bite. I measured every gram and I still felt stuck. And that's because calories matter for weight loss. But for blood sugar balance, it's more about the hormones, specifically insulin. And if you don't address that, you're going to feel like you're gaining weight from looking at a carb. The next thing I wish people had told me is that most meal plans are made for people without diabetes. So if you've been told eat 3 meals a day, 2 snacks, and balanced macros that's predominantly a carb-heavy diet, I want you to know that plan wasn't made for your body. Most of what's online is for the average gym bro or weight loss influencer. Your body's job right now isn't to count grams. It's to survive insulin resistance, and that needs a totally different plan entirely. So what I want to dive into now is what actually worked for me. The first thing is nutrient sequencing. The order of eating changed everything. I used to think portion size was everything. But once I started to focus on the order of my food, my numbers actually stabilized, and so did my mood. Now, I always start with fiber or protein. Think salads, eggs, avocado, anything with texture or fat. Then protein, then carbs. This one thing made my post-meal sugar spikes almost disappear. And it works whether I'm eating out or grabbing something quick at home. The next thing is the 33-ounce water rule. It's my morning cortisol reset. The first thing I do every morning before coffee, before breakfast, is drink 33 ounces of water. Why? Because dehydration increases cortisol, and cortisol increases insulin resistance. And guess what high cortisol does to your cravings? You already know. That morning reset resets my system. It keeps my hunger cues accurate and keeps me from mistaking thirst for hunger. The next thing I totally changed was walking after meals. This is not a trend, it's a tool. I used to think move more meant going to the gym. But for diabetics, a 10-minute walk after meals can cut your blood sugar spike by 30 to 50%. It's like insulin without the injection. Now I literally treat walking like a prescription. After dinner, especially if I eat more carbs than usual, I walk. No perfection, just movement. And the impact is massive. The next thing I do is protein at breakfast. It's a non-negotiable. This one's personal. I used to start my day with oatmeal, a banana, and almond butter. Healthy, right? But I'd crash by 10 a.m. I'd be starving, foggy, cranky. Now, eggs, turkey sausage, Greek yogurt with hemp seeds and maybe a couple of berries. That protein base keeps my glucose flat for hours. And flat sugar means flat mood, flat cravings, and actual focus. The other thing I do is having a method I can stick to, not a diet I dread. I don't count calories, I don't track macros. What I follow now is my plate method. And the beauty of it is it adapts as your body heals. Here's how I start my day generally. I start my day with protein always for breakfast. And if wanted, a small amount of carbs, think a handful of berries. Lunch, half non-starchy vegetables, a quarter protein, and a quarter complex carb, sequenced in that order. Dinner, maybe 3/4 of vegetables, quarter of protein. I have lower carbs here because I really just don't need the energy at nighttime. In the beginning, especially if your blood sugar is running high and your insulin is tanked, this will look more like keto leaning, meaning more of the vegetables, protein, healthy fats, and fewer of the carbs that I just mentioned. But later in your journey, as your blood sugar improves, your carb tolerance expands. And that's when we can start to do carb cycling and nutrient sequencing to keep the blood sugar steady. So we've already discussed nutrient sequencing a lot, but what is carb cycling? Well, it's more carbs on active days. I use a strategic carb around my strength training days, and even adding back things you thought were off limits like fruit, sweet potatoes, and rice bowls, once your body can actually handle it. See, this is about building metabolic flexibility, not just cutting out things forever. Because if your plan only works when you're suffering, it's not a real plan. This is one you can live with, one that grows with you. So, if you've been sitting there thinking, why am I doing everything right but still stuck? You weren't given a plan that was made for your body. You were told to eat healthy, but not in a way that stabilized your blood sugar for diabetes. You were told to cut carbs, but not why your body couldn't handle them. And you were told to move more without knowing that a simple walk after dinner could be more powerful than a gym membership. You're not broken. You've just been doing your best with broken advice. And it's time we change that. If this episode hit home, and if you're done guessing, and if you want a real plan that I use with my own clients and patients, join me on the Diabesity Reversal Method app. You'll learn how to build meals that work, stop cravings that have ruled you for years, and finally feel like your body's on your side again. And if you're not ready to join the app just yet, subscribe if you're tired of being told to just eat less and move more. This channel is for people ready to feel better for good. No fluff, no guilt, just what actually works. I'll talk to you guys later.